everybody. Welcome back to the Silver Lyming. My name is Anne Desjardins. I'm your host here. And again, the mission of my intent with the podcast is to spread hope and awareness for those struggling with Lyme and tick-borne illness and just trying to figure out really what is the best path forward for their bodies. Generally speaking, my guests have gone through the experience and are on the other side where they're actually back into remission and health and wellness again. And I really just like to spread some different ideas for people to consider as a means for healing their body. Unfortunately, with Lyme disease, there really is not one true and tried methodology to healing, and it's a lot of experimentation, if you will, at the end user's behalf, just to try to figure out what to do to fix themselves, because there's a lot of underlying factors, like just in general, what's going on with the person prior to having gotten sick with Lyme and tick-borne illness, different co-infections that could be coming on board, things like mold exposure, heavy metal exposure, and everyone has their own bio-individuality in this fight, and that's what makes it partially so difficult. Also, I would like to say that there are 300 strains, at least, of Borrelia that are known worldwide. And that also makes it very hard to really pinpoint one specific true path forward to healing, because there are so many variations and so many combinations and so many different symptoms. And there are over 100 different symptoms just of Lyme disease alone. And it just makes it more of a shape-shifting landscape, again, in trying to figure out what's going on with your body. Something that's similar to that, and this will encompass my guest and his mission tonight, but we think about something like long COVID, and it is something that I've thought about many times. Like, I wonder if people who get long COVID are people who had Lyme and maybe they didn't even know it, and it's just that their immune system is at a weakened point, and so the virus is just able to attach itself more thoroughly and making it much harder for the body to expel it. But I would imagine with things like long COVID, there's also a whole litany of underlying cofactors that would cause your likelihood of contracting long COVID versus being able to get rid of it immediately. And the immune system is a very beautiful thing when it's functioning well. But a lot of times I think people are just exposed to a lot of toxins from either environment, nutrition, just psychological toxins out there that really affect the immune system and its ability to fight. My guest tonight is Dr. Keith Ellis. He's a scientist and associate professor of medicinal chemistry, and he's dedicated his time and energy and talents to helping people recover from long COVID, which I was talking to him briefly, and I think this is a really valiant endeavor that he's put himself on. And while it might be a little bit non-traditional in a sense, his methodology, and I'll let him explain more about his expertise and how he really goes about doing this, it's very important work. And I do see some parallels between chronic Lyme and long COVID. And so I'm just really excited to have him here to talk a little bit more about the work that he does. And he leans more to medicinal chemistry, pharmacology, and natural products to help his research and understand the biological mechanisms that cause long COVID and the potential therapeutic mechanisms that can help people recover. And I know just from going through Lyme, there's always that question is, do I take antibiotics or do I do the herbal route? Which one's going to be the better thing? And from just my understanding of how it works, typically speaking, antibiotics will come from natural sources first. Like maybe we isolate a component in like dandelion and we're like, okay, great, this is really good. Let's heighten this component of it and help to cleanse the liver, or like milk thistle or something along these lines. And, he's really looking at the chemistry of things and really understanding why they work. And so I'm just, again, encouraged by the work that you're doing, because this is something that is very specific to helping people get through something that is chronic, and it's impacting their ability to have an abundant and healthful life. Like there's nothing worse than being a normal functioning human and all of a sudden you contracted something, not through your own fault. Like it's not like you're a drug addict or an alcoholic or something that you know that things are not good for you. It's just simply from being a human that you come into contact with either a tick or COVID. And now you find yourself in a space where you can't function. You're not able to be the normal, prosperous person that you once were. You're like whittled away. I look at it when I was at my worst with Lyme, was like zombie zone. It was that the lights were on, but nobody was home. My brain wasn't able to function properly. Like I had a broken brain, and it really sucked because I really hated that space. Like I knew the gifts that God gave me, and I was not able to utilize them. It really blocked me, and it made it a very lonely and dark existence for a long time. So thank you, Dr. Keith Ellis, for the work that you're doing. Thank you for being a compassionate human and for looking at something that seems to maybe be um, flying under the microscope, right? Like it's not being analyzed enough and really taken seriously enough. And I know just through my exposure of social media and being on there myself, like I see a lot of people who are impacted by long COVID, and it sucks. So again, just thank you for your time. Thank you for your interest in sharing your work with us. And again, I'm more curious. I really want you to just explain yourself more thoroughly for the listener's sake. But then I'm just curious to ask you some questions about possible similarities between Lyme and long COVID. If you think that my hypothesis, in a sense, of people who have long COVID potentially have Lyme, and that's why their immune system is rendered so useless against the fight, and they're having a hard time passing the virus themselves. And just some other questions that I'd like to go over with you. So if you don't mind, please just take a couple minutes and let my listeners know a little bit more about you, please.
Sure. Thanks for having me. So I'm an associate professor of what we call medicinal chemistry. What does that mean? What is an associate professor of medicinal chemistry? Medicinal chemistry is basically the academic discipline of doing drug discovery. So like the students that I train in my lab, they go on oftentimes and get get jobs in the pharmaceutical industry or the biotechnology industry. So basically, I work at the interface of kind of chemistry and biochemistry and physiology and pharmacology to try to develop small molecules that can actually help treat diseases, right? And my longer term background, my early kind of education and my training before I became a professor was also in the natural products area. So I did natural product total synthesis for my PhD in chemistry. And then the mentor I had for my postdoc, where I did my training in medicinal chemistry, used natural products as the starting point to actually try and find new drugs. And that's something that I did early in my career. We typically don't discover drugs like that anymore, either in academia or in pharmaceutical industry, but that's the way we used to do it.
Can I stop you for a sec? Like, why don't they
Sure.
do it that way anymore?
So using natural products is labor intensive, and there's typically a longer timeline. We have found faster, cheaper, more high throughput means to do it now to try and discover drugs. We also have lost a little bit because natural products gave us this interesting properties of those compounds. They have unique mechanisms of action, and they were derived from nature. So you mentioned when you were doing your intro about the antibiotics starting from natural products, and actually I looked up the ones that are typically used for Lyme disease are all they are the original members of those drug classes were all natural products. And like doxycycline, which people are prescribed for Lyme disease. Doxycycline itself is a natural product. It's derived from bacteria.
Mm.
And the amoxicillin is a penicillin derivative that obviously was derived from bacteria, and ceftin is a cephalosporin, which was also that drug class was discovered by starting with natural products. So that's the way we used to do it. Um, Nature's a really good source of antibiotics because bacteria tend to do chemical warfare against each other. So bacteria are normally making antibiotics that won't harm them, but they will harm other bacteria in their environment, and that's how they compete for space and resources and nutrients in an environment. And I'm looking forward to our conversation today because I actually teach all of the anti-infectious disease drugs to the pharmacy students that I teach, to the graduate students. So um, it it parallels between Lyme disease and long COVID are really interesting to me, right? Lyme disease is caused by a bacteria, long COVID is caused by a COVID virus. And then what we can do about them therapeutically and how they're different mechanistically at a real like physiology, pathophysiology level. The mechanisms that are really causing the disease are different, but there are a lot of parallels, including I think the biggest one is that both Lyme disease and long COVID are caused by persistence of the pathogen, whether it's a bacteria or virus. And that's really what's causing that long-term chronic illness that people are feeling.
Yeah. And I'm also just curious, so help me to understand then. So I was thinking Lyme is a spirochete, which is a little bit different than bacteria. Is that, or did they operate the same?
Hold on a second, let me check something. The Borrelia bacteria is what kind of bacteria is that? I didn't look that detailed in it. I'm checking my notes here that
Sorry
I
to put you on the
made.
spot that way, but
No, no, no. Long, thin, helically coiled. They're gram negative because they have an outer membrane, which is kind of what I pay attention to.
okay.
Um, because they seem to it's interesting because one of the theories on why Lyme disease persists even when treated with antibiotics, right, is that the bacteria is able to enter some kind of dormant state, which is closer to almost a mycobacteria than a straight up bacteria. Oh yeah, and phylum is spirochetes. I do see that. Yeah. So, but they're going to be a gram-negative bacteria um, that are, have some of these properties that are able to make them um, more resistant to antibiotics, right? They can acquire antibiotic resistance. They can go into a dormant state. They evidently produce biofilms, which can also make them much harder to treat with antibiotics. So,
Yeah. And does COVID do that? Does COVID make a biofilm, or that's just if it's like a more of a bacteria or spirochete kind of thing?
so biofilms are more of a bacterial a phenomenon. COVID's a straight up virus, right? So the way that I kind of explain it to the students when I teach is right, a bacteria carries its own DNA, carries its own proteins, it can make its own proteins. It's a fully viable cell on its own. A virus can't replicate on its own outside of a host, right? So the virus really carries its own DNA plus just some very basic proteins. It can't make any more proteins once it has left a host, right? So they're really two different things, and the origins of drug resistance for viruses versus bacteria, there is some overlap, but they tend to be a little bit different. Viral drug resistance mainly tends to come from mutations in the DNA, mutations in proteins that the virus needs or has the host make that are part of its the viral proteins that are produced when it replicates. Bacteria are able to evade antibiotics much more easily in a lot of ways because they have more options. They can not only mutate their DNA, but they can acquire what we call efflux pumps. And these are membrane-bound pumps where they can pump a drug out after they've absorbed it. So they, in effect, lower the drug concentration in the bacteria so it doesn't kill them.
Huh.
There's a bunch of different resistance mechanisms for bacteria that aren't really relevant for viruses. Viruses basically they're able to escape drugs because viruses mutate very rapidly because they're such simple organisms, right? Because all they really have is a genome. So they're able to change their genome and change their proteins much more rapidly. Bacteria can mutate not quite as fast, but they have some of these other options for acquiring drug resistance, like um, efflux pumps, where they're pumping out the drug. They can they can acquire other enzymes that will actually modify and inactivate the drug. There's some bacteria that will acquire an enzyme that modifies their own proteins to make them less susceptible to the drug. There's more drug resistance mechanisms available to bacteria.
And help me to understand, like, why do some people get long COVID?
So that's one of the things that's really not known. That's kind of a troubling aspect of long COVID. So basically, when somebody develops long COVID, they get sick with an acute COVID infection. They have the high fever, the fatigue, like the really bad case of the flu. They get the respiratory symptoms, and then most people will recover. And some people recover, maybe not all the way. Maybe they recover 80%, and they maybe they have a persistent cough or some persistent fatigue or persistent brain fog, and they just never quite get back to being fully healthy. And that persists into a period that's 3 to 6 months post acute COVID infection. And then I'll usually around that time, if you really do get long COVID, you start acquiring new symptoms and you actually get sick. Um, so you get some cardiac involvement, typically some shortness of breath, there's some tachycardia, the brain fog gets worse. You pick up other symptoms that are kind of familiar to people with Lyme disease, like the muscle pain and the joint pain, the peripheral neuropathy. And then people that get more severe long COVID end up with they can end up with severe kind of cardiac symptoms, things like POTS. That's a postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, where they can't control their heart rate when they stand up. They might end up with dysautonomia, which is again an issue with heart rate, with breathing, with the autonomic nervous system. They end up with some CNS type symptoms, not only the brain fog and the headache, but also things like anxiety and depression, and other things that can be caused by neuroinflammation. There's also, of course, always an immune system kind of involvement, which can long-term develop into things like MCAS, that's mast cell activation syndrome,
With all familiar
right?
Lyme people.
Right. So all of these things that go wrong in the body, they happen with long COVID. It's thought mainly as a result of viral persistence and the viral proteins being bad actors at the molecular level and causing physiological uh, physiological effects that then kind of roll downhill into the larger constellation of symptoms. And I think it's kind of the same way for Lyme disease, where the inability to completely clear the bacterial infection, you kind of accumulate these symptoms, and the symptoms become more severe over time because that bacteria is persisting. And again, to me, right, when you look at the symptoms, kind of at the top line symptoms, they can all be very similar between Lyme disease and long COVID. But as you start drilling down into, okay, at the molecular level, what's really going on, that's actually where you start seeing at least some differences. And whether those differences are large enough that they are really dramatically different enough that you need to develop different therapeutics for the different diseases, that's usually what we do. Or is there something that's more of a common mechanism going on? And that's kind of, I think, one of the open questions right now, where long COVID's being discussed in the same conversation with Lyme disease and chronic fatigue syndrome and West Nile and all of these other disease states that seem to be caused by some kind of pathogen reactivation, whether it's a bacteria or a virus.
Yeah, and so you're making me think about, like, do you think that long COVID crosses the blood-brain barrier as well when it's affecting the central nervous system? Because I mean,
Yep.
again, like POTS, dysautonomia, I'm not sure if I said that
Hmm.
properly, but
Yep.
all of those things are similar, like people with Lyme get them.
Hmm.
But um, I often think about like if it hasn't crossed the blood-brain barrier, I think it's a lot easier to eradicate it. And with long-term or chronic Lyme, I think that's what happens
Hmm.
to a lot of people is that it actually crosses the blood-brain barrier, which
Yeah.
antibiotics and things like that can't readily penetrate that. They're just molecularly not small enough
Yeah.
to cross that to effectively fight that battle and inflammation that's happening in the brain. So do you think that's what's happening with long COVID then? It's actually crossing the blood-brain barrier and causing people to not be able to get it out of their systems?
Hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of work going on right now in long COVID on neuroinflammation in long COVID, and it seems pretty certain that the virus does cross the blood-brain barrier and does infect the brain. I think you can detect it in cerebrospinal fluid. So there's pretty good data showing that, and that's not a surprise for a virus because viruses are pretty good at penetrating blood-brain barrier. Bacteria, it's usually a little harder because they're just physically larger organisms.
I was gonna
But I
ask.
know for Lyme disease, right? If you think about um, pathogen reservoirs as being the kind of what they call the pathobiological effect, the actual biology that's causing you to be sick is these pathogen reservoirs. I know the pathogen reservoir for Lyme disease is thought to be bacterial infection in the brain, right? So that's where the persistence is occurring. You're getting constant replication, expect even at low level, and that the presence of the bacteria, the proteins that are produced when the bacteria replicates and goes through its own metabolism and life cycle are going to be what's causing some of the effects that at the molecular level that then downstream are causing symptoms at the phenotype level or the broader physiological level, right? And it's the same way with long COVID. There's kind of a debate, I think, right now in the long COVID community. There's some speculation the viral reservoirs are really the in the brain and in the central nervous system, and I don't think anybody would argue that the virus definitely goes there and does take up residence there. But there's also a body of work to suggest that the viral reservoir for long COVID might also be in the GI tract, and that you're getting viral infection that's persistent in the GI tract, in the gut microbiome, and that just over time, kind of the long COVID, the COVID virus is causing leaky gut and gut dysbiosis by lingering there in the GI tract, and then you're getting leakage of the virus into the bloodstream across the lining of the GI tract, and that's a potential viral reservoir as well.
And do you think the COVID actually causes that leaky gut, or do you think that people already have the leaky gut and maybe that's why it can persist there more specifically?
There seems to be data indicating both,
Mm,
right? I think if you already have the leaky gut, it makes you more susceptible, right? And the line of thinking is like, right, leaky gut is to a certain extent an imbalance in the gut microbiome to begin with.
yeah.
So it's like if you already have leaky gut, well, okay, yeah, it's easier for the virus to take up residence and leak into the bloodstream. But then also, I think in people that are um have a fairly healthy gut before they get COVID, it can also there's some data suggesting that it can actually change like receptor expression in the lining of the GI tract and cause function for I forget the receptor name, but there's a really nice paper showing that COVID virus can actually affect gut uptake of serotonin, right? So there's definitely viral effects on the gut, as well as, okay, if the gut's vulnerable, where you're having gut dysbiosis or leaky gut issues before you get a COVID infection.
Okay. And then I've also been trained that if you have leaky gut, you usually have leaky brain. Are you familiar with this concept?
No, I am not familiar with that one.
Yeah, just because like the actual, I think of them as gateways or bridges or
Mhm.
whatever that get stuck open in the gut, which is what's causing the leaky gut. That also happens in the brain um, as well. So I don't know if that helps you in any way or you have anything to
Interesting.
think about with that. But um, one of
So
my,
when we, okay, go ahead.
oh, that's okay. I was just gonna say one of my nutritionist friends had taught me that like if you've got leaky gut, you most likely have leaky brain.
So typically, and again, I kind of always think about these things in the context of what we've been trained and what we think about for doing drug discovery and development, right? So when we think about drug delivery, oral drug delivery through the GI tract, we're thinking about either active or passive transport through the GI tract, and for us, typically, um, transport across the lining of the GI tract tends to come down to physiochemical properties. It comes down to polarity. It comes down to how hydrophobic a molecule is. In terms of pathogen um, transversing the gut, if it's not leaky, that one I haven't really thought of, and I'd have to look at that to see what the common understanding of that is. But then we typically treat transport across the GI tract different than the blood-brain barrier, because that's transport across the blood-brain barrier is across the tight junctions, and that again is not just a blood flow issue, but the blood-brain barrier is really designed to exclude most things that are very polar, right? You have to be a little bit not more non-polar to get across the blood-brain barrier. And there's not as many active transporters because there's not as many things that are supposed to transport into the brain as there are across the lining of the GI tract. But again, how the virus exploits that is always the question, or the bacteria, right? In the cases of um, Borrelia for Lyme disease, and that body of literature I'm not familiar with.
No, it's okay. It's just I've always kind of thought about that. And I mean, to me, it makes sense. Like if something is not functioning properly, like the gate isn't closing properly, then
Mhm.
one could make the assumption that it's not closing properly in the rest of the body too, in other areas. So
Sure.
I'm just curious about that. And so what do people do with long COVID? I mean, again, as I had alluded to in the beginning, it's like people with chronic Lyme, it's hard because it's not one sure pathway. Like no one knows with certainty why some people have it chronically. I mean, I guess we could surmise that being that it's a corkscrew shaped organism, it really burrows more into the body. So it's just like really deeply entrenched in our system. So therefore it takes an act of God to get it to come
Mhm.
back out because it's like comfy and cozy in there. And how do you really make that thing come out? But it hides in places where antibiotics do not readily penetrate it. So
Yeah.
with someone with long COVID, that's very similar. Like it's hiding in there. How do you scare it out? What do you do to fix that?
So when I teach the students in the anti-infectious disease class, I always talk about at the beginning that you have to be able to project the antibiotics to the proper site of action in order to have anything happen, right? Because you can give all the antibiotics all day you want if they don't end up in the right tissue in the body to actually help with the problem,
Yeah.
right? So, and of course, getting antibiotics across into the brain compartment is a challenge. There's not a whole lot of them that do that. It is a tougher problem. So for Lyme disease, it does definitely seem to be where the bacteria is taking up residence in the brain, and then everything's kind of flowing downstream from there, especially because I know Borrelia has effects on like what proteins our cells make as a result of the infection, right? The proteins from the Borrelia infection actually affect our own gene transcription and what proteins can be made, right? So that's a whole nother level of issues that that's going on in Lyme disease, along with the immunological effects, right? Because there's some data showing that the bacteria can latch onto some types of immune cells that kind of protect it from the antibodies in the immune system actually going after it and trying to kill it, right? So it manipulates our system like that, and that's what Lyme disease. COVID in the way it causes long COVID's a little more simple. So the bad actor for most things in COVID is really the spike protein. And one of the better mechanistic hypotheses for what causes long COVID is the COVID spike protein actually binds to um, our own proteins in our blood, the protein called fibrinogen. It's a protein that's involved in clotting. And that viral spike protein binds to our own fibrinogen protein and causes it to change conformation into this unnatural conformation. And then it polymerizes and forms microclots. And that the microclots in blood circulation are actually what are causing all or most of the downstream symptoms for long COVID. So microclots can account for causing the fatigue, causing the brain fog, causing a lot of the cardiac symptoms like the shortness of breath, even the POTS, can cause the dysautonomia. Microclots can actually account for a lot of the broader symptoms and the constellation of symptoms you see in long COVID. And it's all originating from viral spike protein causing this conformational change in our own proteins to generate these microclots.
And so the microclots, is that just not letting the blood flow right as to why those symptoms are happening, or what is, I don't know, I'm not sure if I understand that.
So it's a combination of things. The microclots, when they form, they're kind of sticky, so they hold on to things in the blood supply that they shouldn't. They bind to platelets and activate platelets, and platelet active hyperactivation leads to a bunch of contributing to things like inflammation and immune response and all those types of things. The microclots can tie up red blood cells, which impairs oxygen delivery to the tissues. Right. So in general, the microclots are just kind of these bad actors. The immune system can detect them and cause generation of autoantibodies, which is where you get some of that immune response that's more like an autoimmune disease, because the autoantibodies are being generated in response to they're natural proteins, but they're in an unnatural conformation. So the body's seeing that unnatural conformation is foreign and generating what are in effect autoantibodies to it, so that you get some of that unnatural immunological response that where the body starts attacking itself. So basically the microclots, they're these, because they're in these unnatural conformations, the best analogy for them is to the amyloids that are formed in the brain that cause Alzheimer's disease, right? So those amyloids of tau or A beta protein in the brain are the plaques that build up that cause Alzheimer's. Basically, these microclots are amyloids of the proteins that cause that clot, that build clots for us when we bleed. And it's this unnatural buildup of these amyloids of fibrinogen that's actually the physiological issue that's then causing all these kind of propagating effects downstream to generate the symptoms of long COVID.
Okay. And so what do you do about it? Like, what are you seeing as options for people to fix themselves from these microclots?
Sure. So the very talented investigators that came up with microclot hypothesis and did a lot of the very basic foundational work on that area, they actually took it one step farther, and they used an existing cocktail of three anticoagulants called triple anticoagulant therapy. And they decided to try and use that on people with long COVID to see if it would break up the microclots. And at the time that they did this, using a single anticoagulant by itself was known to not really have an effect on microclots. So they knew you couldn't just take one anticoagulant. So they decided to try this combination called triple anticoagulant therapy to see what would happen. And they did a small study. It was about 90 patients with long COVID, and they used triple anticoagulant therapy with these patients. And at the end of the study, about 80% of the patients had actually recovered from long COVID, including they could detect that the microclots that those patients had before they started were gone. So triple anticoagulant therapy definitely worked well in that small study to help people recover from long COVID. The issue is that there are some significant drawbacks and issues with triple anticoagulant therapy itself. So you're using three anticoagulants together. There's a kind of a safety issue there, right? So there's a significant side effect, a significant risk of serious bleeding as a side effect. Um, because of that, it's three anticoagulants together. Physicians are kind of understandably reluctant to just prescribe it because there's a safety issue, and there's not more evidence-based data justifying using it for long COVID. And then kind of the third barrier for the long COVID patients was one of the anticoagulants in the therapy is really expensive, and insurance companies don't want to cover it for long COVID because it's not approved for long COVID. So when I was starting to work on this and was really taking my own look at microclot hypothesis and seeing what could be done to really help people with long COVID, what the people with long COVID that I talked to were telling me is, well, we know this is out there, it's available, it looks like it works, but nobody can get their hands on it. And that was kind of a very, very disappointing and almost, angering thing for people, because people with these chronic conditions are really suffering, right? It's really negatively impacting quality of life. They're not functional in their own life,
Yeah.
and they need somebody that's willing to actually do something to help them actually get back to living the life that they want and deserve.
Yeah. And that's very similar with Lyme. It's like normal functioning people all of a sudden are finding themselves bedridden, um, not able to even get out to go to the bathroom half the time. Like they're really struggling, and they've got POTS and they've got all these other things that cause it to be very difficult to be upright. And I mean, it's terrible. Like nobody deserves to live in that space. Again, I call it zombie zone. Like I was a living, breathing zombie. Like I couldn't really even take care of myself. Like it shouldn't be like that. I am a doer. I'm somebody who goes. I'm very active, and it is incredibly frustrating when you're stricken with something that you lose that capability. And you have, thank God I don't have kids and I don't have a family. Like the people I help that have families and children, like the guilt that
Yeah.
they're riddled with, like that's not fair. That's even compounding their situation worse. Stress is a huge component to triggering symptoms, and that stress alone is enough to really make somebody go bananas. So it is something that really needs to be studied and understood a lot more readily. And I don't really talk to too many people with long COVID, but I can see as time progresses that that population is going to grow, right? Like
Yeah.
the more people
And well, it's
exposed to
it's
it.
already a huge population, and it's
Mhm.
it's getting bigger. The two numbers I kind of like to talk about are the studies are showing that basically every time you get COVID, you've got a 1 in 10 chance of getting long COVID
Good grief.
every time you get COVID. So
That's
the first
not that
infection
exciting.
doesn't protect you when you get a second infection. It's a 1 in 10 chance every time. So that's number one. And then number two, there was a study published last year. They looked at worldwide numbers for how many people had had long COVID. As of the end of 2023, it was 410 million.
Holy God. I had
Yeah.
no idea it was that many people infected or
Yeah. So
impacted.
it's a
That's
it's a
crazy.
really large population. And the really frustrating thing, and people with Lyme recognize this story, right? You get sick, you go to the doctor. The doctor can see you're sick. Doctor runs every lab known to man on you, but everything comes back pretty much normal, right? Nothing that really is actionable in whatever testing they do, right? So the primary care says, well, you're having X, Y, and Z symptoms, so I'm going to send you to A, B, and C specialists, and you get on kind of the specialist carousel, right? And you're just passed from specialist to specialist, trying to address the symptoms physiological system by system, right? Which is the way modern medicine is designed to treat. And there's no real holistic look at what's going on and trying to help you. And in the meantime, people can barely get out of bed and function, and they're not really getting any help. Which is why kind of when I started this, my what I was doing on long COVID, I really had in mind to do a classic academic drug discovery project, right? Let's go look for some new protein targets for a long COVID, and let's start the process of developing new drugs, right? Because we all know in both academia and pharmaceutical industry, it's kind of commonly accepted. It takes 10 to 15 years to develop a new drug, especially for a new disease state, right? Long COVID is really a new disease that we have not seen, until recently. So it was one of those, well, I wanted to go get started. Let's start doing this. But then there wasn't really sufficient focused data on the molecular level targets beyond microclot hypothesis, which is kind of why I focused in on microclot hypothesis and kind of took a different direction than developing a normal pharmaceutical therapeutic.
And I'm also curious, so do you think the vaccine has any impact on this for people? Like, are people who were vaccinated less likely to have long COVID, or it doesn't really matter? There's no real correlation there.
So at this point, the data is unclear, right? So there are certain things that are known. The first kind of wave of people that got long COVID got it before the vaccine was available. So there's definitely people that have long COVID and still have long COVID. They're called the long haulers because they've been sick with it since before, early 2021. There's definitely patients out there in that population. So it's not that the vaccine caused it, because long COVID seems to hit both vaccinated and unvaccinated people. There's, I think at this point, conflicting data. There's studies that say, well, you're there, more of the population isn't vaccinated. There's other studies that have it the flipped and say that more people have long COVID that are vaccinated. I haven't seen anything large enough to be definitive yet to say one way or another as to whether you're protected more from long COVID by the vaccine or not. Um, Certainly the idea behind microclot hypothesis being the kind of causative mechanism for long COVID is really operating off of a viral reservoir type theory, right? Where you've got persistent virus that's just hanging around that you just can't get rid of, kind of similar to Lyme disease.
Yeah.
But at the same time, and no one's done this study and published this. I've been waiting and poking some people, but it's still not out there to see whether people have looked at microclots in like the segmented population of whether it occurs whether microclots occur more predominantly in people that are vaccinated versus not vaccinated, that have long COVID. So at this point, it's still a little bit of there's a lot more questions than there are answers right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So keep being busy over there.
Yeah, yeah.
Keep researching, keep figuring it out, keep asking questions, because I'm just processing, like I think you said 41 million people have long COVID? Is that
410 million. Now
okay?
that's cumulative cases. So that's both people that have recovered and not recovered.
Do you know what the population is that has not been vaccinated?
Ooh. Uh, I think I only know that number for the US. I think in the US it was like 15%, somewhere between 15 and 30% were not vaccinated. Like usually it's the number that's quoted is more than 75% of the population was vaccinated.
Okay. So then my head is just thinking like 410 million people is probably a lot larger than the non-vaccinated population. So
Yeah, it is.
yeah, so it would be pretty fair to deduce that that doesn't
Oh yeah.
necessarily have any bearing per se, one way or the other.
No, and when you go and talk to people with long COVID, when you go kind of talk to the community, there's a lot of them that are, have been vaccinated 4 or 5 times. There's a lot of them that had one, two, maybe three, and then there's some that had none. It's all over the place,
Yeah.
which is why I think it's been a particularly hard thing to nail down because you have to do excuse me, when you have that kind of heterogeneity, you need to do a much larger study
Yeah.
to actually get statistically significant results from trying to figure out what contribution the vaccine would have to long COVID.
Yeah. Just curious. And then maybe as a final question, is there things that you could say
Mhm.
that you can do to prevent getting long COVID, like um, supplements or taking care
Mhm.
of your immune system, or what would help your likelihood of not contracting long COVID?
So and this is where things get a little gloomier, right? The only real way to 100% protect yourself from getting long COVID is to not get an acute COVID infection. That seems to be the only
Yeah.
completely surefire way. Now, aside from that, I think there is a good argument to be made that long COVID seems to be disproportionately hitting people that have pre-existing issues with their immune system. So, and there's a couple subpopulations that kind of emphasize that and lead you in the direction of thinking about that. Well, one subpopulation that seems to be more at risk for long COVID is people with pre-existing autoimmune conditions. So if they already had an autoimmune issue before they got COVID, they seem to be a little more at risk. They are overrepresented in the long COVID community. Another interesting one that's kind of a corollary that didn't make sense to me at first, but now it does completely, is there's a large subpopulation in the long COVID patient population that prior to getting COVID and long COVID were high performance athletes, marathoners, triathletes, like the super fit, super healthy people. And when you think about it, it doesn't make sense at first because it's like these are the really healthy people. They're watching what they eat. How can they be more at risk? But when you dig down a little deeper into it, people that are doing really heavy physical training, like training for a marathon, like training for a triathlon, those high performance athletes, they are pushing their body kind of to the edge, and they're pushing to their body to the edge energetically, right? Because they're trying to squeeze every ounce of performance they can out of their body. But also that type of training puts a lot of stress on the immune system. So it's well known, and it was well known before COVID in those communities. Like when they're doing a really heavy training block, it's not unusual to get sick at the end of the training block because they're pushing so hard that it actually impacts their immune system and their immune response. And same with their energetic system. And long COVID seems to have some deleterious effects on mitochondrial function, which is the energy system, right? So they seem to be more at risk as well. So that's two subpopulations that are pointing towards having any kind of immune stress or immune dysregulation prior to getting COVID does kind of put you at higher risk for long COVID.
Yeah. And that's why I think about, again, just with Lyme people, it's like I would maybe consider them as like a prime target sometimes, unfortunately, just because the immune system is already in a state of dysfunction and not
Yeah.
there to serve as well. And that also leads me to another question then. How about mold? Do you
Mhm.
see mold impacting this for people?
I have not seen any like real any studies on that yet. I think what I'm kind of seeing is people are starting to be much more aware of a lot of the um, things that functional medicine tends to look at, functional and integrative medicine, that standard physicians don't, things like heavy metals and mold and other toxins. And people are starting to be a lot more cognizant of the fact that the our modern lifestyles are subjecting us to and exposing us to a lot of things that really do have an impact negatively on the immune system and on our physiological systems and our biochemistry, and it's putting people more at risk. But I haven't seen any studies directly on that yet, but I think it makes sense, and I would think those are going to be coming at some point
Yeah. And what about steroids?
in terms of.
So I've been taught that steroids are more of an immunosuppressant and they're
Yeah.
making the immune system not function properly. So like, for example, with people with Lyme, I've been taught
Mhm.
that you really should avoid steroids at all costs because it's going to make it all the harder for your immune system to work properly. Um, just
I think it that starts getting down into what people are experiencing with long COVID. A lot of times if you have a really bad respiratory infection, you go to the doctor and you're going to get probably an antibiotic, and if you're really that bad, you're going to get a steroid, right?
prednisone,
To
yeah.
right, and I think that's happening with the long COVID population. But again, because diagnosis is so all over the place and physicians don't know necessarily what to do, and there's not a whole lot that can be done for long COVID. I think people aren't really aware of the fact that the steroids could be an issue. I haven't had anybody tell me, I took the steroids and it got worse, or I have not seen anything saying that actually did any kind of study to track whether steroids have any kind of effect on long COVID, because I don't even think science and medicine are there to ask that question yet. And I haven't heard anything anecdotal from the patients yet either. But
Mhm.
I mean, at this point, the patients are asking much better scientific question than the majority of the scientists and the physicians. And maybe I shouldn't say they're asking better questions. The long COVID patients are asking much more relevant questions of what can I do or not do to help me get better now than the physicians and the scientists are asking. Especially the scientists, we are asking longer term basic science questions that are all important. And I don't mean to disparage anybody, because you have to build a, a sufficient body of scientific literature in order to really start developing therapeutics. But we're not focusing on it, and we're not being intentional in the way we're doing research. Everybody's out there doing research the same way they were doing before COVID. They're just doing it on COVID and long COVID now. And it's not exactly a fast track to develop help for people. It's the slow process, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of focus or a lot of initiative to want to do anything to help people anytime soon.
Not that exciting.
Yeah.
Um, and now, okay, because I'm just me, I'm curious also about ivermectin. Do you see that ever studied in long COVID people or like the impact that that has?
Right. Ivermectin's kind of a mixed bag, and there were studies on it, and then I think at least one or two of them got retracted. Like, I don't see. I think people are still looking at and exploring ivermectin for acute COVID infections, but it's not really kind of that relevant for long COVID because the effects it has seem to work better in the acute phase of viral infections, right? And for what it was developed for, ivermectin's more of a drug for acute phase infectious disease type uses. It's not really used as much for the chronic type effects because I haven't seen anybody with a good mechanistic rationale to use it for long COVID at this point.
Okay. So then if I'm understanding you right, there does seem to be some sort of acceptance that potentially that is useful in an initial acute case.
I think it depends on which physicians you want to talk to and whose experiences you want to believe, right? There's a whole slew of COVID clinics out there and COVID physicians that swear that ivermectin works great and it for acute COVID infections. There's a whole nother slew of physicians out there going to say that no, it doesn't work. At best, it's a placebo, and at worst, you're actually doing some damage. Now, ivermectin itself is a very safe drug. Just looking at it as a drug itself, not talking about what you're taking it for.
Yeah.
Ivermectin itself is a really good drug, right? Safe, not a whole lot of issues. So I tend to come down in the, well, if it's not going to hurt you, what's the harm in trying it, right? And that's kind of the attitude I take with more natural remedies, right? Of if you can take something natural and it's not going to hurt you and has a chance of helping you, go for it, right? And with the drugs that have a good safety track record, it's almost like well, what's the harm?
Yeah. 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 Just curious. I mean, I know that was a big hot topic
Yep.
during COVID and people were like, oh, it's horse uh paste or whatever they're
Dewormer,
called.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yep,
thank
horse
you.
based. And part of the problem now it is some of those polarized fights that happen. It makes it really hard now to talk about things and really study things because there are points of view that are more interested in winning arguments than actually looking at data and coming to a conclusion with an open mind. So some of that stuff I think's gotten very difficult now to look at just because of all that background polarization.
Yeah, which is unfortunate because uh, coming from the perspective that I feel that you are, it's like you're just genuinely trying to help people figure out a solution to allow them to get back to living their life and having the quality of life that we deserve. God did not make us to be
Yep.
sick. God made us to have joy and abundance and health. And so when we get taken out of that space, it's very um just very hard, very despairing and like just sad and lonely. And again, I'd be curious to know. Maybe I really don't want to know, but like, I know Lyme has one of the highest suicide rates out of any disease out there
Mm,
because it's a very long battle and it's a really long, intense struggle to regain your health. And it feels very overwhelming most days. And it's like, I'm never going to get better. And it's a very sad space again.
yeah.
And so I just talked to a lady today. It's like, I've been thinking about it a lot. I'm like, don't do it. Do not do it. Do not do it. I thought about it a lot when I was sick and I'm so glad that I didn't do it. But it it felt like it was going to be an easier option than fighting that constantly. Do you see that as a route that people are exploring with long COVID?
I haven't seen or talked to too many people that are to that extent in terms of the hopelessness. Um, there is a fair amount of mental health issues that go along with long COVID, and I think it's the long COVID causes the mental health issues, and the mental health issues are caused by the long COVID. It's like a double whammy, right? So from a physiological point of view, the some of the underlying mechanisms for long COVID affect things like serotonin,
Yeah.
right? And affect the levels of serotonin in the body, which of course causes anxiety, it causes depression, right? Causes a lot of those mental health issues. So there's like a chemical physiological the long COVID is causing those mental health issues, and then just the sheer debilitating nature of the long COVID is then causing mental health issues on their own because people are depressed because they can't function. They can't go to work. They can't spend time with their friends or family or doing things they enjoy. They can't pursue passions in life or do anything that they feel like is meaningful, and that's what leads to what you're talking about. And I think um, in a lot of these chronic diseases we're seeing it's getting to that point with people, especially in the ones where people are feeling abandoned by the medical system and that they're not really getting any help, and it is hopeless because no one is there doing anything encouraging for them.
Yeah. And do you know, can you speak to the thought of insurance? Like what, so if people are not able to go to work, people are not able to earn an income and take care of themselves, what
Mhm.
does insurance help them with treatment options? Do they get disability? Like what, how does that work?
That I don't know all the ins and outs of from some of the people that I talked to that in the long COVID community, they can have issues getting disability. But I also I know here in Virginia where I live, I was speaking with somebody that is on the state disability and rehabilitation board. They are starting to be very proactive about making it so that people with long COVID can get on disability or can get jobs that are more well suited for having the types of chronic health issues. So jobs where there's less physical activity, where you're sitting all day doing something repetitive, and it's easier for a person with a chronic illness to have those types of diseases.
Wonder how we do that in the Lyme space, because I know a lot of people don't qualify for disability. Are
Mhm.
not able to get out of bed.
Yep.
I've had people calling me that are losing their house because they can't pay the mortgage. Like, and it's that's a huge crime against humanity, in my opinion, is like
Yeah.
treating these people with the invisible illness. That's really, it's not like cancer where everyone's like, oh, your hair is falling out because you're going through treatment. Let me help you. Let's have a fundraiser for you. It's like these things that people, you look at them and they look fine. I guess maybe with long COVID, at least I shouldn't say it like that, but I mean, maybe they have a cough or
Yeah.
maybe they have something that's like tangible versus people with
Well,
Lyme. We don't have anything that's really tangible and it makes it very difficult.
and I mean, with cancer, you get a definitive diagnosis,
Yeah.
right? Cancer, oncology as a field is fairly mature now. We've been on this cancer biology kind of system of really investigating underlying biology of various subtypes of cancers and not treating it as one big disease, but treating it as a lot of smaller diseases. So you go to the doctor and people, they know what to look for in the blood work. They understand what to do to actually get to a diagnosis and say, you have this. You can do biopsies in oncology. There's no biopsy to do for Lyme disease or for long COVID or for other chronic diseases. There's no blood test. There's no clinical blood test. There's no biopsy. There's so it is this. It puts people in this place where they have a hard time not only communicating that they're sick and getting kind of the empathy and compassion that they deserve, but they have trouble documenting that they're sick to an employer or insurance or for disability and everything else.
Yeah. Which hopefully that changes soon. And I just want people to have support or options. And
Yeah.
I joke sometimes like if you want a designer disease, you can go get a case of Lyme disease because like it's so expensive and you gotta do all this fancy stuff to fix yourself. And it's like this is crazy. People even with millions of dollars struggle to fix themselves with it. It's not that simple. And it's really a shame because I think about like the homeless population or children, for example. Like I had words to vocalize what was happening in my body. and they still tried to tell me that it was all in my head and it was just stress.
Mm,
I knew
yeah.
that systemically there was something wrong with my body. Something was very wrong with me. And they tried to tell me that I was depressed, which is another reason why I was feeling that way. I wasn't depressed. I was becoming depressed because of how I felt every day with no end in sight of these symptoms going away. No matter what I did, no matter what I tried, no matter how much I stalked the people at the vitamin shop to give me things to fix
Yep.
my body, nothing made an impact. I could pound a bottle of caffeine. I could take a bottle of caffeine pills, like nothing touched the fatigue. They even put me on Provigil at one point in time, which is a
Mm,
shift sleep disorder stimulant. I
yeah.
I kept asking, when do I feel better? When does the tiredness go away? The doctor's like, what do you mean? You should have noticed that right away. I was like, I do not feel any different whatsoever. And like that was making me depressed because no
Mhm.
matter what I did, I just couldn't make these symptoms go away. And so it's a shame because it's so misunderstood and people who don't have it don't get it. You don't get it till you get it. And I don't want
Yep.
people to have to get it to get it. Like that's the problem. And it's like, how do we change this belief system? How do we change this dialogue and make people understand that it's not all in our head? Like, I'm pretty sure my Lyme lived here in my head. I wish that I had brain scans. I wish I had images to say, like, this is where it was living in my brain. I could feel it. Like, I could just feel the presence of something there in my head. And like, again, I could almost feel that sensation. Like, I had Bell's palsy on the left side of my face. Like, I had this
Mhm.
strange sensation. But like, no matter how I vocalized myself, they just told me I was crazy. And that right there is very damaging to a person's psyche as well, to
It
be
is. Yeah.
told that you're crazy and there's nothing wrong with you. And so then you just become silent. Like you don't, at least that's what I did. Like I didn't talk to people about it because I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. Like there's medically nothing wrong with me, no matter what tests they were doing for me.
No, and it's the same way with the people with long COVID. And the first, half dozen people that told me literally the doctor had told them that it was all in their head. It floored me that people can't even get out of bed and walk across the room and you're going to tell them it's in their head. That's that's a a community of people, speaking of the physicians, that have kind of lost their way trying to help people, right? Because when somebody's obviously that sick, that's not what you tell them if you have an interest in helping them get better. And I think it's you know when I approached long COVID, when I went into the literature, I think I was expecting to see the same intention and the same focus for long COVID that I'm used to from oncology, right? There's been this really real push over the last 20 or so years to really drill down into the mechanisms behind what's causing any specific type of cancer to figure out better how to detect it early, and then how to treat it. And I was expecting that same mentality and that same intention and focus being brought to bear on long COVID, and it's not there, and it's not there for any chronic disease, whether it's long COVID or Lyme disease, West Nile, chronic fatigue syndrome. And I guess I don't understand it as a scientist why we've developed all these sophisticated ways of doing experiments and asking questions and understanding disease states, but we're not using it for some of the disease states that make people the most miserable. Not that getting cancer is any less bad, but um the the long-term disruption to life with a lot of these chronic diseases, I just don't understand how people justify not putting in more effort to figure out a lot of these things.
Yeah, I don't either. And I can say that I've interviewed people who have had both cancer and Lyme, and they say Lyme is far worse. Not to make light of cancer because I'm
Yeah.
sure that would suck too, but like it's just a different battle. You have a known protocol, you have a known path forward
Yeah.
with cancer, you know what's going on. Again, people support you, they give you fundraisers, la la la. Meanwhile, you've got Lyme. There's no straight protocol, there's no straight path forward, there's no party for you, there's no sympathy for you. It's just like figure it out on your own. Good luck. And
Well, and you have to hunt around to find somebody that can even know how to help you.
correct, correct. And I don't quite get that. Like if I mean, I've gone to the Capitol here in Pennsylvania. We did some activist work to try to get better legislation in place to cover people more adequately that suffer from it. And interestingly enough, a lot of the higher ups in insurance companies were in the back of the room watching what was happening. And I was fascinated by this. Like, they were not happy that we were there speaking up and trying to change things. And I can't figure it out for the life of me. Like, why do they care? What does it matter? I mean, if they're willing to cover the treatment of cancer, they're willing to treatment the cover of heart care, etc. All these things are not cheap. They have huge price tags to them. And it's almost like, maybe I'm revealing too much of myself, but sometimes I think they like try to perpetuate these cycles of sickness. If I look at the nutrition that we have, the food supplies, the chemicals that they're putting into things, like I feel like it like feeds that almost to cause some of those problems, that they want that to happen. Like, why, if we have other things that are causing issues like that could be treated by them, why are they so concerned to block that? What does it really matter? I don't get it.
And it doesn't make any sense to me either. Like I'm usually thinking about it more in the context of pharmaceutical industry, right?
Yeah.
And them I at least understand because a lot of these things that pharmaceutical industry isn't addressing, you know, big pharma, they do make a lot of good drugs that help a lot of people. And at the end of the day, they are a business and they're not a charity. They have a business model and they have to stay in business. And you can respect that, right? Because if they go out of business, they don't help anybody. So I think with a lot of the chronic diseases on the big pharma side, the only thing that makes sense to me is the patient populations aren't big enough that they think they can make money. That's the kind of the only thing that makes sense to me. But long COVID seems like it's a big enough patient population that they should be able to make money. I For long COVID, I think they're waiting for the same thing I am to do drug discovery. They're waiting for more science, but the, so the academics not moving fast enough is holding up industry as well. But for things like Lyme disease, I don't understand. The biofilms are a known issue. The the drug tolerance is a known issues, and there's known strategies you can take to go deal with those things. And I'm not sure what's stopping people from doing more of those.
Yeah. I mean, and if you really start to peel back the layers, you get into the whole political undertones of what is happening, and um, nobody really wants to take responsibility for it. But like, oh God, I could really go off on this.
Right.
Like,
And the insurance, I don't understand why the insurance companies would want to block trying to do anything to help people that are sick get better or have a better quality of life. That just that one I don't understand, probably because I don't understand the business model. Is usually when I don't understand a motivation, my first guess is usually follow the money.
yeah, yeah. And I guess I don't understand the business model either. And I think of, like, that guy Luigi is going through my head right now, and killing the United Healthcare CEO, and like, that guy had Lyme, and he has Lyme. And so that's been something that's been talked about a lot in the Lyme community, is that's potentially what drove him to do that, right? And
I had
I,
not heard he had Lyme disease. I hadn't heard that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. And so I think I try not to go onto the news because I think it's just soul poison. But um, I did note that I think during his fraternity hazing, he was going a little bit crazy. Like, his symptoms were flaring, and during studies and blah, 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 it just made him much more, his symptoms a lot more active. And
mhm.
I don't know enough of the details, but I know that there is some discussion as to that's potentially what has pushed him in the direction that he went by killing that person. And I certainly don't advocate that by any stretch of the imagination, but the thought of him not getting help or treatment or being denied because of that, or whatever it is, like, I get it. I can get it because I lived through that and it was horrible. Like I paid a specialist $550 an hour to help me. That was really expensive. I saw her every 4 to 6 weeks, let alone blood work and antibiotics. And then God knows I was on $900 a month easily of supplements.
Mm.
Like it's just it's not sustainable. It's not fair. Like it shouldn't have to be like that. There should be a different system. Like we have come to a really broken place, I feel like, with our medical system. And I know that's not really what you're here to talk to me about, but it just makes me think about all that stuff and just the mistreatment of people. And it should be their objective to help people. And I just recently learned that in 175 years of existence, Pfizer has yet to cure one disease. Maybe their drugs help
Mm.
people, but they have yet to cure one disease in 175 years of existence. Personally, I think they should be ashamed of themselves. That's not helping people. You're just band-aiding people. You're not helping them. It's their model to sell these drugs to put people on for a lifetime. Get to the root cause, figure out what's genuinely wrong with people and fix them. Don't just band-aid them or placate them with some kind of a prescription for the rest of their life, which then is going to cause other symptoms, which then puts them on other pills, which then it's just like this perpetuating cycle. And it's obviously I'm very passionate about this. It's coming through and I'm trying not to be, but I am very convinced that that system that we're in right now is not truly fixing people. That's concerning to me.
Well, I think at the end of the day, there's an expectation now, particularly for people in America, that when they get sick, they're going to be able to go to the doctor. The doctor is going to be able to figure out what's wrong. And there is going to be some kind of plan and some kind of treatment to help them get better.
Yeah.
And for in some areas, we're doing really good with that.
Yeah.
But there are definitely conditions that are where we're not living up to that expectation. And that's when people get upset. That's when they get angry. That's when they get depressed and despondent,
Yeah.
right? Because everybody just wants to be healthy and live a full life.
Yes. Very, very well said. That's all people, and we have a right to that. Like again, that's God doesn't make us to live a life of sickness and destitute. Like we're supposed to be healthy. We're supposed to be abundant. We're supposed to have joy and happiness and be able to enjoy the beauty that He's given us and surrounded us with. And when you're sick, it's like, I don't care about any of that. Like I am
Yeah.
struggling really hardcore right now. And I try to have gratitude and I try to hold that space and energy and sentiment. But when you don't feel well every day, it's like, this isn't working. This isn't how it's supposed to be. And it is just definitely something that's hard. It's a very hard journey. And I will pray for people with long COVID. I'm grateful for people like you who care, who really want to make a difference, who want to help people get back to a state of health faster. I will pray that God shows you the right way forward to continue to find things that work faster than 10 to 15 years from now, because 410 million people are counting on you, not to put any pressure on you, but we're looking to people like you to fix this. And I know in our own country, 400 to 600,000 people a year are infected with Lyme, which, you do the math over a period of time, that really starts
Yeah.
to add up. And that's just in the United States. That's not even worldwide. This is a worldwide epidemic as well. And it's really not getting the attention it deserves, because if I understand statistically speaking, that's more people than contract HIV, AIDS, breast
Mm.
cancer, hepatitis, and colon cancer combined, that population. And
Mhm.
so if we're thinking about it in that perspective, we really need to do something differently. We really need to change how we're looking at this and how we're approaching it. And we need to care more about people who are having these invisible chronic illnesses sooner. Like it needs to be top priority. And I think it was like 1% of the budget for healthcare research goes towards Lyme. That's deplorable. Again, that's just not right. Like that's disgusting. That just blows my mind, because it is such a large segment of people. And long COVID sounds like way
Yeah.
bigger of a population and huger problem. So the fact that people
Well,
aren't on all hands on deck with it is like, what?
in Lyme disease, it's been around. It's not new,
No.
right? It's one thing to react slowly to a new problem. It's
Yeah.
another thing to accept that the problem's there and just not really react and not really do anything about it over time.
Yeah. Because I mean, in 40 or 45 years, they've not changed the diagnostic testing for it.
Mm,
At best, it's 65% accurate. At best. That's not something I want to rest my hopes
yeah.
on as a diagnostic tool. Like, you've got to be kidding. That's a joke. You have better outcomes sometimes of predicting your coin flip than you do of getting an accurate test for
Mm,
Lyme. And so, how many people go getting that test and then are told that they don't have it, that truly have it? And no offense to the CDC, but they've also put some guidelines or recommendations around that to suggest what really equals a true Lyme diagnosis. And they've
yeah.
even admitted by um, their own fault that that's not fair. Like the way that they've put that to have 5 bands that test positive to make it
Mm,
100% certainty CDC assurance that yes, you definitely have Lyme is not fair. And if there's again 300 strains at least worldwide, 100 at least in the United States that are detected, how can you tell me that if I've got any kind of band of Lyme showing in my body that I've not been in contact with it? It doesn't
mm,
make any sense to me whatsoever. And so, but at any rate, again, I do appreciate your energy and your time and
yeah.
spending it with me here and
Mhm.
just your thoroughness and thoughtfulness in trying to figure out ways to help people with these chronic conditions because it's imperative. And I think about all the other problems that spout out of these kinds of things. Like if you've got long-term COVID or you've got chronic Lyme, like does that make you more susceptible to things like cancer in the end, or to heart disease, or to these other problems, or to psychological issues? Like, I know it made me into a very different person on an emotional
Mhm.
spectrum. And I talked to a lot of people who unfortunately developed cancer after getting Lyme. Like, if the immune system is rendered in a very poor functioning state,
Yeah.
you're just like a sitting duck, and that's not cool. That's not okay. So again, we really need to take actions to figure those problems out before they become lar
Yeah.
I don't want to say larger because it's already a large problem, like when you have these other things, but like I can't even say more severe. They're all just as crappy as the next. Like I don't want any of them.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
or people who get hip replacements or knee replacements or like any kind of I think Lyme sometimes is the impetus there and it's the driving force, and we just don't consider that. And that's problematic
Mm,
for me.
sure. Absolutely.
So again, I appreciate you and thank you for being a guest here on the Silver Liming. Is there a way people can contact you if they have questions about this that they'd like to further discuss it with you?
Sure. The best place people can go is my website. It's keithcellisphd.com.
Okay.
And there's links there for my Substack on the work that I've done on long COVID. There's a link there to be able to email me all my social media videos I've made about long COVID, and then the product that I've created to try and help people with long COVID.
Yeah, perfect. Again, I really appreciate you. And we didn't actually talk a lot about that, the product that you've developed
Mhm.
to help people.
Yeah.
Do you want to mention something about that quickly?
Sure, sure. So I mentioned about triple anticoagulant therapy, and it kind of had these drawbacks of the safety issue and the access issue, people having trouble getting prescriptions for it from physicians, and then the cost issue. So I uh I I had mentioned I had started my career early on more in the natural products area, and I was used to the process where we would take a natural product and then we would use that as a starting point to develop pharmaceutical drugs. And looking at triple anticoagulant therapy, it's like we needed a safer, a little less potent version of it that was available without a prescription. So an over-the-counter product that was affordable. So I took the training I had in natural products and in pharmaceuticals, and I basically reversed the process that I normally do. And I took triple anticoagulant therapy and reverse engineered it through the mechanisms of action of those drugs to come up with natural products that had the same mechanisms of action, and custom formulated a natural version of triple anticoagulant therapy for people to use to recover from long COVID. So I custom formulated that, and I actually went ahead and again did something I normally don't do. I formed a company and had it manufactured, and have been providing it to people that have long COVID, and it's getting some good results. It helps people with the brain fog and the fatigue, and a lot of the cardiac issues, and even to the point I've had people tell me that it helps with the dysautonomia and some of the more severe symptoms of long COVID.
Good job, Keith. That's fantastic. And so if people are interested in that, I would imagine that's on your website that they can.
Yeah, if they go to keithcellisphd.com, there's a link for it there. The product's called CircuGuard, so there's a link there, or they can just go to circuguard.com, and that they can find all the information about the product there.
Okay, and if people are interested in that, it's CIRCUGUARD, CircuGuard. So
Yep,
looking to
circuguard.com or keithcellisphd.com. Yep.
Yeah, cool. Well, again, I'm humbled by your efforts here and really just appreciate the fact that you're a caring human and that you really want to make a difference for people now, not 10 to 15
Yes.
years from now.
Yeah, because people need help, and their waiting is really not an option for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And if nothing else, my goal was to provide something that was safe and natural that people could decide to use and decide to try without having to seek anybody else's permission, like a physician that was telling them it's all in their head.
Yeah. Yeah. Which unfortunately happens pretty much every day. So, yeah. Well, thank you again. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Mhm.